we're going to conclude at this point by talking about the parable of the debtor. So those of you that don't know the parable of the debtor, I have it here. Jesus was sitting with his disciples, and Peter, one of his disciples, said to him, this is in Matthew 18, says, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me and I forgive him? As many as 7 times? And Jesus said to him, I do not say to you 7 times, but 77 times. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. When he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. And since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and payment to be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. And out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. But when that same servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. And seizing him, he began to choke him, saying, pay what you owe. So his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him, have patience with me, and I will pay you. This man refused and went and put him in prison until he should pay the debt. When his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their master all that had taken place. Then his master summoned him and said to him, you wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. And should not you have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you? And in anger, his master delivered him to the jailers until he should pay all his debt. So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart. So obviously Jesus is dealing with how to forgive your brother.
Yeah.
But I think this directly connects to how we forgive others in general, the forgiveness that we should have in our heart because we've been forgiven. I think this is the key to unlocking forgiveness in your heart towards others.
Right.
And I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
So real quick, I think the issue was that there was a debt that was forgotten, that was paid for. And so, yeah, they weren't able to apply that same forgiveness to someone else who owed them far less than what they were forgiven for.
Right.
You know, so I think at the core of being able to forgive is to remember what you've been forgiven of. That's really at the core of it. This person lost their sight of the great debt that they've been forgiven, but weren't able to forgive someone who owed them little. Speaks of someone who just completely forgot and didn't know or weren't thankful for the debt that they were forgiven. So I think that's at the nutshell what Jesus is saying. You know, don't forget the great debt that was paid. You know, if you do that, and I would say, you know, I would include the gospel in there. Forgetting the gospel, forgetting what Jesus did, what he actually did on the cross for you, not being mindful of that, you will end up treating others the way that you weren't treated. It's just inevitable. So it's a great reminder, because this is how the kingdom of heaven is. You know, that's what he said. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared.
Yeah.
You know, there's a king, Christ. He forgave us of a great debt. How can we withhold forgiveness from others?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's good. My concluding thoughts on the parable and just the episode, I would say that the aftermath of this whole situation is that God gets the glory. God will get the glory. Whether we know it or not, he will get the glory. Christianity looks good, but also looks weak. This is a real good conversation starter and because it shows man's natural heart and your own. your own heart. It separates the real and the fake saints as well, or at least saints that need to be rebuked because of their hardness and unforgiveness in their heart. It really needs to stop, y'all. We need to be glorifying God for this. So when it comes to the parable of the debtor, I would say that I just thought it was funny. Like, you're dealing with somebody who would never be able to pay back the one who owed him, or who the one he owed, right?
Yeah.
Because logic and reason doesn't add up. Nothing this man did prior to owing this ridiculous amount of money shows that he can steward his money well enough to be able to live even modestly and pay back the debt. The math doesn't add up. Not only the logic and reason, but the math doesn't add up. A denarii a day is about, what, 300 a year. It would take 33 years if he worked every day and saved every denarii, not spending even one. The math doesn't add up. But let's not forget that this man not only needs to live, but his family, he has to provide for them as well. So the math don't add up. And lastly, nothing could ever add up. This man could never pay back this debt. The word that was used there in the Greek was the highest number in the Greek language. Yeah. Which is, it says 10,000, but to us it would be, it would translate to a zillion. He owed his master $1 zillion. He would never be able to pay that back. Yeah. And that's how we are in the eyes of God. We'll never be able to pay him back for the forgiveness that he shows us. Right. But we can forgive others and be merciful.
And we can't forget.
Yeah, the whole 77, the 70 times 7 that Jesus was telling Peter. I have a friend that actually helped me with this years ago. He helped me to understand it in a way that I understood it. Maybe you'll understand it. It's something that you have to repeat, because every time that you think in your head, yo, this person did me wrong, it comes back to your memory. You have to forgive them again. It's continual forgiveness. So that 70 times 7, you could easily go past that in a lifetime. Right. Just thinking about what that person did to you. The fact that you can forgive someone, but you're still gonna hurt. And that's what we're seeing with this situation. Because we're looking at it like our loved ones, we want them to rest in peace, but the surviving ones, are we resting in peace? Do we rest at night in peace, right? To not forgive someone is to hold a grudge, and that's to be angry, and to hate someone, and that's just as bad as murder, which Jesus talked about earlier in the gospel. So 3 questions to meditate upon, and I'm done at this point. 3 questions I want you guys to meditate on, and ones that I'm going to meditate on. And first one is, do we really trust God's sovereign and final judgment? Ultimately, number 2, do we trust God will right all wrongs and that his sovereign will is sufficient? And the third question, because we love to say God's grace is sufficient, but is it sufficient enough to give us faith to believe his ultimate plan and end game is the best? These are things that we got to ask ourselves. Thank you guys for tuning into this episode of The Basement, where theology meets the thoughts of life. This has been episode 27. The title is Hug Your Enemies.